All right. So chapter 2 of Exodus. It's book 2. It's like 2-2 because it's like the second book and the second chapter. 2-2. 2-2. Well, like if it were like a TV series, I guess that's how that would be. 2-2. So the first 4 verses of Exodus start off with a man and a woman getting married. They don't have names, and they have a son who they proceed to hide for 3 months after he's born. And then when it gets too much of a burden for them, the mother wraps the baby up in cloth and like waterproofs this basket and puts it down the Nile River and lets it go. While her daughter, like the baby sister, is watching this happen and like follows the river down the basket. The river down the basket down the river. And then in verses 5 through 10, Pharaoh's daughter finds the baby in the river in the basket, figures that it's probably one of the Hebrew babies that her father is trying to kill. And when the sister, the little girl, sees this, she goes up to Pharaoh's daughter and is like, would you like me to find someone to take care of this child for you, to nurse this child for you and stuff? And Pharaoh's daughter is, of course, yes. I guess of course, I say of course like she has to say yes. She could easily have said no. So anyway, the little girl goes then and gets her mother, and Pharaoh's daughter pays the mother to raise the child until it comes of age, which isn't specified. But when the child does come of age, the mother then takes the baby back to the palace, to Pharaoh's daughter, and Pharaoh's daughter adopts the child as her own and names him Moses. So let's just get into this, because this is just like these first 10 verses are so crazy to me. I can't even. The chapter starts off with a desperate mother and a desperate family. They have a son, and they're in a time right now where if you have a son and you're from the country of Israel, your son's going to be killed. So to save their son, they try to hide it for 3 months. So just to put this in perspective, I don't know if you've ever had a kid. I've had a baby. They don't understand when it's time to be quiet. They will cry and scream, like there's smells, and hiding a child, no matter like what day and age, where you live, like hiding a child for 3 months from people who you can assume are in a very jam-packed, like tight space. I mean, these are an enslaved people of a great multitude. And we saw in the previous chapter, like the Egyptians weren't exactly treating them well. So it's not like they had like a house like we do. Like they probably had like a room in a house would be more like, be a better like visual. So to keep a child hidden for 3 months, I can't even imagine. And then when this burden becomes absolutely too much for the mother to handle, because hiding a child is hard work, she takes a leap of faith and she puts this baby in a basket, she floats it down the river, and she hopes for the best for her child. Of all the people in Egypt who could have found this child, it was Pharaoh's daughter. And Pharaoh's daughter had such a heart. God softened her heart so much she didn't want to kill this baby, and went so far as to raise this baby, to pay to have this baby raised, I guess is more likely, and then adopt this baby as her own. And that's so crazy. And the fact that she's paying an enslaved woman, like Moses and his mom are from the tribe of Levi. They're Israelites. They are enslaved to the Egyptians, and here is the Pharaoh's daughter paying an Egyptian, or paying a Hebrew to raise a child that she found, that she knows is Hebrew. She knows the child is Hebrew, and she doesn't care. I mean, it's so totally 100% divine intervention, and you can have that in your life too. Because see, this is such a good illustration of what we do. All of us, we all do it. You're not really supposed to generalize, but I can tell you right now, whoever you are, you have done this. You probably do this without even realizing it. You have this problem. whatever it may be, this issue, this problem, this burden, and you try to carry it all on your own, and it weighs on you. And then finally, you give it to God. You give it to God, and you let God take care of it, and you let God's plan go into action. And God will use your faith as a blessing for you, and he will use your problems as a blessing for you, because that's the loving God that we have. He will take your problem and your burden, and he will make it a blessing. He will take your child and have you paid to raise it when you are enslaved. Like, so good. So good. So let's move on with Moses' life a little bit. So 11 and 12, we jump ahead way into the future. They don't specify with ages, but he goes from the point where he's being raised to now in verse 11, he is a full-grown adult. And he decides to go out and visit his people, the Hebrews. Specifically says that his people, the Hebrews, and is overcome by their treatment and what they go through. And while he is visiting with them, observing them, he sees an Egyptian slave He sees a Hebrew slave being mistreated and beaten by a slave driver. So Moses stops. He looks around, like he sees this, he goes, I don't like that. He looks around to make sure that nobody is watching, and then he kills the Egyptian and hides his body in the sand. So, yeah. 3 things I'd like to point out in these 2 verses. So 1, Moses knows who he is and where he comes from, because it says he went up to visit his people, the Hebrews, which means he knows that he's a Hebrew, he's not an Egyptian. Chances are, if Moses knows that, most of the palace court is going to know that, and probably most of the population. So the second thing is, he sympathizes with and for his people, the Hebrew people, the people of God. And I think that this is something important to note, and you'll see why. Or I'll see why in a minute. The third thing is, when he kills that Egyptian, it's kind of planned, because he sees the injustice, and that's bad, and you can definitely stop it. But the next step isn't murder, and there's so many things you can see that he knows what he's doing is wrong, because he stops and he looks around to make sure no one's around, and then he hides the body. But the one thing I'd like to point out is, you can't hide the body from God. You can't see him, but God's watching. In verses 13 through 15, Moses goes the next day and visits the Hebrews again. So he is drawn to these people. He's definitely feeling some kind of empathy for them. And while he's there, he sees 2 Hebrew men fighting amongst themselves, and he's like, yo, why y'all fighting? And they basically are like, mind your own business. You ain't nobody special. You're just another Hebrew. Get out of here. And then they got really sassy. And then they ask him if he's going to kill them like he killed the Egyptian yesterday. And Moses freaks out. Which, I mean, like, if anybody called me out on committing murder, I'd probably freak out too. And then we find out that Pharaoh has found out as well about the murder, and then retaliates with trying to kill Moses. So Moses flees Egypt and goes to Midian. This is now going to be the second time that Moses tries to help the Hebrew people with peace, I guess, and justice and all that stuff. I'm just gonna go with all that stuff. Which is important to note. If you're I'd write that down. Moses helps the Hebrews for a second time, and then he runs away, which is important. I'm sure, I know I'm totally missing something, in these verses, but I don't know what it is. Anyway, so verses 16 to 20. This is good. This is where it gets really good. So Moses, in verses 16 through 20, Moses, when he arrives in Midian, he's resting by this well, and he sees these 7 daughters. I'm assuming they're beautiful. because God created them. God creates everything that is beautiful. So he sees these 7 beautiful girls with their sheep like coming over to the well. And this is pretty normal for them. They're shepherds. They're female shepherds. Cool, like equality in the Bible. Just saying. I don't know why that's equality in the Bible. I guess because shepherds are generally depicted as males. But so the men shepherds in that area tend to mistreat these women because they're women, and Moses defends them, and then he helps them care for their flocks, like pull their water and water them or whatever. I don't know. I'm not a shepherd. I don't know what you do with sheep. Other than you shear them and make some nice Ugg boots. That's what I know. They go home and they tell their father, who is a priest named Raoul. Raoul? Does that look right? I don't know. I'm gonna put it there though. And he insists that they invite him for dinner or invite him over. He's kind of upset that they haven't already done this. So things to note here, right here. It's gonna be, it has to do with number 3. This is the 3rd time that Moses helps God's people in some way, because even though these women, these girls in Midian aren't Israelites, their father's a priest, and then you later find out that they're Christian, I think. Maybe they're wrong. Maybe I'm totally wrong about that, because they're not Christians back then. They'd be Jews. I don't know. I could totally be wrong, but they're still God's people because God still created all people. So this is the 3rd time that we see God helping and defending God's people, which is now kind of like a solid character trait for him. I know with like prophetic thing, with like prophecy and dreams, my pastor always says that if you have the same thing happen, like the same vision, the same dream, if you hear the same thing 3 times, then it's gonna happen. 3rd time's the charm. Let's go with that rule. We're going to call it the 3rd time the charm rule. That didn't make any sense either. Oh well. Verses 20 through 23. Moses accepts the invitation to meet with Raoul and his daughters, and during the dinner, Raoul offers his daughter, whose name, I'm just going to call her Zip. Zip is her name, Ziphrah. Ziphrah. Oh my god. Ziphrah. Oh my god, Ziphrah. I just got a name in the Bible. So Raoul offers his daughter Ziphrah to marry Moses. Moses accepts, and they have a baby. A son specifically that they name Gershom, which is a translation of the Hebrew for foreigner, because Moses is a foreigner living in a foreign land, is the explanation given in the book. Did Moses develop a habit for helping God's people and then God rewarded him with a wife and a family? I don't know. Kind of. But anyway, so and then verses 23 through 25, we get a recap of what's kind of been going on in Egypt since Moses went off to live his happily ever after. And we find out that meanwhile, back in Egypt, the Pharaoh who tried to kill Moses and who enslaved the Egyptian people has now passed away. Despite this, things have not gotten better for the Israelites, and they've actually kind of gotten worse, and the Israelites are crying out so much that God hears it, and that's when he knows that it's time to act. This is another illustration. It's kind of shows you that God's timing is always perfect, but it's not always going to be earthly. It's not going to always line up the way that you think or the way that you want or the way that you feel that you need it to. So things have gone from really great, like the Israelites were on the top of the pyramid in the time of Joseph, and they slowly slimmed down, and things have just gotten worse and worse and worse. And now God is going to act. God could have acted anytime he wanted to, but this is his signal. Because see, your life isn't always going to go the way you want it. Things are going to go bad, but you have to remember that God has a plan. And it might not always be clear, and the situation might suck in the moment, but God's got a plan, and you just keep praying, honey. You keep praying, because he hears you. And there's going to come a time where he's going to act. That's all there is to it. I didn't really plan out how I was gonna end this. It's definitely a harder ending than the first chapter because it is a real like cliffhanger. It definitely goes right into chapter 3. So I guess I'll just see you guys next time because I don't know how to end this, but you know, this is it. So I hope you liked it. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, or prayer requests, most importantly, if you have any prayer requests, please leave them down below. And I'll see you guys next time for chapter 3. Bye.